My name is Sam McCarter, and I'm going to talk for the next half hour on writing tasks 1 and 2 for the academic version of the IELTS. And obviously, I've got half an hour to say main points. I won't be able to cover everything. So if I don't talk about something, it doesn't mean that it's important. It is just a selection of things that I want to say today. Okay. Now go on to the abstract. If you've signed up for this, you probably have had at least a glance at this. The aim of the talk is to give you as much practical information as I can in half an hour, but looking at ideas in organization and how to develop ideas for both components. General introduction, writing task 1, writing task 2. Writing task 1 is made up of a short description of minimum 150 words of data, and this can be pie charts, it can be bar charts, it can be line graphs. Increasingly, it can be plans of buildings, plans of streets, it can be maps, and it can be processes. Because your students may not have come across these latter tasks recently, it doesn't mean they're not in the exam. They are in the exam, and it's quite important for us to include them. I say us because I'm still a practicing teacher. I still teach in a hospital here in the UK. Writing task 2 obviously is much broader, and I will come to that in a second. So we move on to the next slide. It's quite difficult to be creative in writing task 1, and I think for many students they sometimes want to try, but the task 1 is an objective analysis of data where opinion should not be given, where students can make comments. I think one of the biggest problems in my teaching is getting students to read the task. They look at the graph or the pie chart, they jump straight in, look at the detail, and they just want to give me a list of this rose, that fell, etc. But if we look at the rubric, which is quite often ignored, I think for every lesson, every time you do this, you need to get students to look at this and look at the first word, summarize. This is very, very important. Students need to be, not just to summarize the whole task by giving an overview, but to summarize each line, and where possible to summarize by amalgamating information. So it's not just about summarizing an introduction and the overview, it's about introducing the data itself to prove the overview. So as a general principle, the idea when writing, and it applies in task 2 and in speaking and in reading, is this move from general to specific, with the introduction and overview at the beginning, and then the general introduction of the line with the data coming afterwards, which I'll explain in a second. Now, I've included here the public marking scores, and this I've taken from, it's on the web, but I've taken it from IELTS Scores Explained, the British Council Cambridge DVD. And this is the comments for Band 7 for task achievement, coherence, and cohesion. And if you look at the task achievement on the left, it says covers the requirements of the task, i.e. that students describe what is there and they summarize, etc. And then, this is vital, the academic presents a clear overview of main trends, differences or stages. And this is probably the most difficult aspect for students in the exam and in the class. There's a tendency sometimes for students to just make a list of data in sentences without trying to make an overview generally at the beginning or the end, and without giving an overview to introduce the data itself. So there are stages in the writing from general to specific. And obviously on the right you've got the coherence and cohesion. This coherence and cohesion goes all the way through. It's not just between sentences, it's through the whole task. So these are areas that as teachers you can get students to improve, which can have a huge impact on their writing and their score. Because if everything is in place, then they can get a high score in a way that they might not get with the vocabulary and with the grammar. Now here we've got some essential features for the language, and I would give this as a checklist for the students. I use this all the time with my students. These are the things that you want to get students to focus on, and the things that you want as a teacher to make sure you cover when you're doing the language. And you can give a checklist like this, or you can get students to make their own checklist, which they use before they write, to go through and say, right, we're going to cover this, 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 and this, or we're going to focus on this particular aspect today. While they're writing, they can use it as a kind of guide, and when they have finished, they can go back and check their writing according to these features. Now, I've mentioned general and specific. I'm just going to go and look at a couple of them very simply. And the first one that I've chosen here is comparison. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Comparison, we might tend to over-focus on comparison of adverbs or comparison of adjectives. But comparison in an academic text might include more comparison of nouns and phrases and chunks and adverbs and conjunctions. In the next screen, what I'm going to be talking about briefly is the use of nouns in academic texts. Nouns and prepositions are much more common, so it makes sense for us to get our students to write overviews by saying there was a trend in. Here I've given you an example with a noun phrase from the middle of the text. There was a greater increase in car sales, and their students are constructing a summary using a greater increase in car sales. This is where the summarizing comes in. And there you can put the data at the end from 5,000 cars in 1920 to 3 million cars in 2015 or something like that. So you've got this general noun phrase summarizing the data at the beginning, and then the actual data coming at the end. This movement from general to specific. Nouns are also useful when you're describing pie charts, accounted for a greater proportion of. I'm going to have a quick look at noun phrases in a second in relationship to pie charts. You can use phrases to connect the information. This is a sharp contrast with to, as well as just using by contrast, by comparison, while, whereas. So it's maybe when students have written a piece of writing where they've included lots of verbs in their description, like car sales rose more slowly than, or car sales in the UK rose more slowly than car sales in Russia or France or whatever, and then from, get the students to go through again and transform four of their sentences using nouns, and then get them to think about the link between such transformation and the use of nouns in the reading. It will help them to be more aware of the noun or use or nominalization in the reading. So we are moving in IELTS, if the students are coming from EFL or General ESOL or ESL into academic English, there's this move from verbalization to nominalization. And there is, I think, a leftover from EFL when students are using verbs, a list of verbs to describe a graph, when really there should be an attempt at using nouns much more. And this is this move from personal to abstract. The personal to abstract aspect of IELTS is very clear when you come to look at the speaking, where part 1 is general and personal, and part 2 is still personal but moving towards abstract ideas, and part 3 is very abstract. Task 1 is abstract and objective primarily. Part 2 of task 2 is abstract and impersonal. So there is this big jump in the writing, which I think some students have difficulty dealing with, and it makes it difficult for us as teachers, because if the student's mind frame is still in EFL and being concerned with verbs and building information around verbs, it's quite a jump to get them to change this. So we might have an overview which says, overall, it is clear that there's a rise, increase, fall, drop, trend, change, and difference, correlation, relationship, one of these between. And if you remember the rubric at the beginning, this is where the summarizing comes in, and we are when you look at the public marking scores, they actually mention the changes, trends, and differences. So this all has to tie in, and it's worth getting students to read the public marking scores. They are available. So this could be a very clear structure for you as teachers to give for the overview, getting students to write the overview with a noun and make a list of nouns. And if you think here, I've given you, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These 9 nouns will cover many situations, not all situations, but many situations. You can then get students to add adjectives. You can get rid of "it is clear" and say there is a clear rise. You can keep the "it is clear" and say there is a gradual rise. There's a, whatever you want. So get students to develop it themselves. Give them the overview if necessary at the beginning, and get them to build the overview. Sorry, but making sure that they exclude any specific information except features. And then when you're moving on to the body of the task, this would be in the middle by comparison. There was a steady rise. Notice the difference in tense. Overviews are like conclusions or definitions. Generally speaking, you put them in the present, like the introduction the graph shows. Then you're moving into the body. There was a steady rise in culture from to, with an increase. That should be from, not from. It was my typing. So if you can get students to change the sentences a little bit, this would be very, very, very good. If you think about it, in task 1, how many sentences will you write? Introduction, 1 sentence. Overview, 1 sentence. And if you're lucky in the body, 4 sentences. So really, having 1 or 2 with global information would be very good and help to increase the confidence and score of the students. Pie charts vocabulary. Obviously, when you're looking at pie charts and any particular type of graph, you need to think of the vocabulary beforehand. Here, the words you might want to brainstorm or get students to decide what vocabulary they need here. And when I look at this, it's not just percentage, it's proportion. And adjectives, large proportion. It's a quarter. It's less than a quarter. It's a greater proportion than. We want verbs like account for, constitute, comprise, consist of, form, represent. So give these to students beforehand, sometimes with a model or without a model, and get them to build the information, but maybe do the eliciting of the information as regards vocabulary beforehand. This is an example of a street plan, and it might look at, there would be a street plan B. You might get students to use a local map and get them to show changes themselves that they would like to put, very simple changes like traffic lights, focusing on road safety, or you might want to make one particular street pedestrian, or you might want to turn something into a roundabout. So get them to draw the map again and get them to see what safety measures they could put in before they describe. Now here, this is talking about plans for the future, and we seem to be, a lot of what we do is talking about map changes and street plan changes in the past. So it is worth actually doing both. But to get student involvement, give them the first map and then say, draw another map for the past, and then the next time you do it for the future. But remember that the language will change. So obviously, if it's the future, it'll be phrases relating to the future, tenses relating to the future. But more importantly, you might be using the passive, and you might be using it is proposed that, it is planned that. So this is something that needs to be included because students may come across it not just graphs. Now, obviously, the time is limited here, and the main thing I would say here for task 1 is this move from general to specific, trying to incorporate noun phrases into your writing and getting the students to build using noun phrases. Writing task 2. I think writing task 2 is very open. Students obviously get double the marks for writing task 2 compared to writing task 1. These circles represent bands 6, 7, and 8. Obviously I've removed 5 and 9. My students are roughly around the 7 core. And I find quite often that students become quite comfortable. I don't think students fossilize as much as what we might think they do. Some people might disagree with that, but I think it's our job to challenge the students, but they tend to something new or something different from what they normally do does stretch them, and they might go back into their normal core. And this, you might find with writing, students find it quite difficult to go into a band 7. They feel comfortable in a 6, and they want to do things the way they do, and then we wonder why they don't pick up new vocabulary and why they don't change their structures. It's our job as teachers to try and break that, and I try and break that through a focus on organization. And you might do this through the rubric. And the rubrics are basically the same and have been for quite a while, but these are the basic rubrics attached to many subjects, and they change over a period of time. Nowadays, there may be several elements added in one particular question. So students must answer, if there are 2 questions, students must answer both or even 3 questions. If you take the second one, discuss both these views and give your own opinion, there are 3 elements there. Students must discuss each view separately and then give their opinion. And this is a very basic clue to the exam. If you're doing to what extent you agree or disagree type essay, which may come on its own or with another element, students get quite confused as to what needs to be done. But the clue is in the second subject here, discuss both these views and give your own opinion. When we're giving opinion ourselves, it's always gracious, polite, and academically sound to consider other people's opinions. If somebody's doing a PhD or an MA or whatever, they want to have a review of the literature and look at the types of analysis that have been done in the past, and then at the end of that they give their own opinion. So it's the idea of, although both these views exist, my opinion is this. To what extent you agree? Well, other people believe this, or some people believe this. I agree, I believe this. So it's a good way of getting students to think about structure. Put other people first and yourself second, and follow the rubric. So if you've got what are the causes, what measures, you follow that structure. The thing that is absent from many parts of the exam when students write is the elements that are requested in the rubric. Give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples. Students tend to overgeneralize when it comes to task 2 and don't put in reasons and examples. And a paragraph is quite short, doesn't require much in it for the exam, but it is the element that is left out. Reasons and examples give context and clarity, so it's quite important to put in. Contrast is the task 1, where students tend to overspecify and don't do summarizing. My personal belief is that students don't lack ideas. They lack an ability to organize and link ideas and possibly to categorize ideas. And I would say that if you look at any question in the exam, you are categorizing, and this is a pre-writing exercise, which I think we need to get into the habit of doing. Quite often we are presented with a problem A, and then we have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 causes, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 solutions, or we might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ideas. So it's for us, for us to choose how many to put in, and basically you only need 1 or 2. But it's getting ideas and putting them into categories before we actually start thinking about the writing. And we could do this in the abstract, so when students start to think about categorizing, they go into it automatically. Now, this is a basic frame. Sorry, I've got a very bad frog in my throat. The basic frame for writing. And we want to get students to write into a structure rather than writing into a blank page. If we have an introduction and a conclusion, then we have 3 body paragraphs. And yes, you might have 2 body paragraphs, but if you have 3 body paragraphs, students should be thinking about how to develop these paragraphs. So if I am making the introduction and conclusion the same length roughly, we might only want to have about 50, 60 words in total, which leaves about 190 for 3 body paragraphs, which is about 65, 70 words for each paragraph. Nothing more. 70 words is basically about 4 or 5 sentences with a topic sentence followed by reasons and examples and maybe a conclusion, which is quite simple. So getting students to think about this beforehand, before they write, is very, very useful. I saw somebody asking how long should we spend on the pre-writing. When I'm teaching, I can spend up to an hour in a class pre-writing, get the students to do the writing at home, and the or if I've got a 3-hour class, then the writing in the class. You may not have that luxury, but the more we put into planning and getting students to organize and develop ideas beforehand, the better it will be for the writing eventually. Now, this is something that can be built up as another exercise. I mean, you might choose a couple of pre-writing exercises. And here I've got a list of AL adjectives, and you think how many AL adjectives there are in English. It's at least 3,000. And when it comes to task 2, the answers for analysis are basically the same. Many questions have got a social element, an educational element, or a financial aspect, or environmental aspect. So getting students to think of writing a topic from an environmental point of view, from an educational point of view, from a technological point of view, would go a long way to helping them organizing their ideas. This is why students don't need to have lots of ideas. The ideas are recycled because the perspectives are recycled. They are quite limited. Many essays, if I'm doing an essay on poverty, education will come into it. So it's not just these adjectives, it's nouns. And we might incorporate this into our topic sentence and say blah, blah, blah has an educational impact or has an impact on education. So you can have a list of types of topics that can be analyzed from maybe 12 perspectives maximum. It will help you to control the ideas, and also to students to control their ideas. This is quite an important development because students tend to maybe have come from an EFL background, a general language background. This movement away from personal to familial. So if somebody's looking at technology, for example, they might say, well, I don't know much about this from an abstract point of view. Well, they know about it from a familial point of view. They might say to them, well, does your grandmother have an iPad? Probably not. She may do, but let's say she probably hasn't. Therefore, you can see that there's an age issue when it comes to using technology. What do you use technology for? Oh, I use it in classroom, but I also use it to talk to my family back home. So your family, including your grandmother, are talking to you on Skype or FaceTime or whatever other vehicle you use. And then you can look at this from a national point of view. What is your government's focus from the point of view of technology? This is quite a useful development, and you can make this a list like this using the elements in the previous page. Making connections. Here we've got technological, this is our perspective, and we might be looking at a subject where the impact of technology on the growth of the economy, the impact of technology and health, what role technology plays in communication at a national and local level, what is the impact of technology and education. And you've got a very good example we are using a webinar to talk to people from all over the world. So this is a good example. What is the impact of technology on our design, etc. You can get students to build noun phrases for task 2 here, to give headings to the paragraphs they're going to use in their essay, and then we can incorporate these nouns into their topic sentences. So this is a very, very simple thing to do. Now, my 30 minutes is up, but I think I can go on for another few minutes, if you don't mind, and see if I can incorporate a few more slides. Henry's nodding, so it should be in the we can do this. Okay, we're going to give a quick look at a question here. This is the volume of e-waste or electronic waste around the world is now greater than ever before. We can look at this question. It's obviously a problem, and we are looking at the causes of the problem, and we are looking at the measures. So the key words here in the rubric, apart from the general subject and the fact that there's a problem, are the causes and the measures. So therefore, the body of the essay should reflect this. So therefore, I would have my plan where I have an introduction to the problem and the focus of the essay, and that would be in my introduction. I state a general problem and say that I'm going to look at causes and problems. I can do one of two things. I can have 3 body paragraphs with a cause followed by a solution in each paragraph with examples and reasons. So dividing it up like this makes it easier to control and easier for us to mark as teachers. Then we have the conclusion, which reflects the introduction. Or we can have the introduction of the problem and then the focus of the essay, again, causes and solutions. And we can have one paragraph covering the causes, and just if we follow a 5-paragraph structure, which is fairly classic, we can have a solution in one paragraph and a solution to in the other. So the causes in the first body paragraph become the introduction, sorry, the causes of the first body paragraph become the introduction to solution 1, solution 2 in the subsequent paragraphs. So there's this gradual classification going from very general problem and then causes and then solution, and then causes in the first body paragraph, which then introduce solution 1, solution 2, and then conclusion. And this kind of structure can then feed into all essays, because if you think about it, what are we doing again? It's like, although there are causes, here are my solutions. Although other people believe this, this is what I believe. So it's a structure of putting something before. It's a time and locational structure. Okay, now I'm going to have to jump on to the next slide. A very simple paragraph. We have a topic sentence here. Education can play an important role in reducing poverty. This is obviously a different subject, where you have the impact of education on poverty. We're back to impact. We've got a general sentence, and then we've got our specific example. And we can then have a specific example, cause and effect chain. It is this structure which is important in writing and developing a paragraph. And you notice the language is not that sophisticated. It's the structure which is sophisticated. If we get that right, we can then develop students' vocabulary and get them to use important phrases like play an important role in. This is an example of a paragraph. There are many, many ways of dealing with this, you could give students a paragraph and ask them to find the elements on the left. You need to jumble them a bit more. But you could do this with any paragraph, and then you could start doing it with reading, and students can see the connection between reading and writing, and also hear effectively the speaking. So if you think about it, if I talk about learning a new language or learning a new skill, we can get students to put these elements. This is, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements here. We have our topic sentence, and then we might look at the cause or the effect of learning a new, the need for learning a new language, and also give examples. So it's controlling by limiting. We analyze the questions, the same question I want to just very briefly analyze. You could look at the students' writing from a point of view of giving students example introductions and giving them mistakes and getting them to look at the mistakes. This is a good way of getting them to focus on the introduction stuff. And you see here, it's very short. It doesn't need to be very, very long, but we can get students to control the mistakes by getting them to see that it doesn't have to be very, very complicated. I think I'm going to have to finish with this slide. We might want to get students, once they've written a paragraph, to map it from a point of view of perspective, or map it according to the time sequence so that they can be aware of the verbs in the sentence, and then map it according to functions. I gave you an example of a paragraph on education and poverty where the functions were they had to analyze. But it's good for them not just to analyze other paragraphs, but their own, and they can take one paragraph and explain it to a partner or explain it to the class. You could get students to rewrite a paragraph from a different perspective, or to paraphrase the paragraph. Okay, I'm afraid I am going to have to stop with that because we have gone over time. We're now at 37 minutes. So thank you very much for listening. And this has probably reinforced many of the things that you're already doing, and hopefully made you think, yes, we're all doing very similar things. And maybe adapt and tweak some of the ideas for the future. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and maybe see you next year. Okay, any time for questions? Anybody want to ask some questions? Is there anything coming up there? Is it going too fast? I see, is conclusion necessary? I think it is important to get students to write a conclusion because it is to do with task completion. Students are asked to write an essay, then it should have a conclusion at the end. You might not write a conclusion for each paragraph, but an essay should have a conclusion. Otherwise, it's hanging in midair and is unfinished. The conclusion should be a mirror of the introduction. In an academic essay, a full academic essay, the conclusion could be quite long. I mean, academic introductions may be 100, 120 words, and the conclusion is likewise. But in the IELTS exam, there isn't space for that. If you think about it, the introduction says, I am going to do, my general subject for today is this. My focus of essay is causes or opinion or solutions or whatever. And then you write the body of the paragraph, and the conclusion says, oh, look, this is where I have been, and this is, and that is it. You don't need to write anything more. One sentence is enough, with a paraphrase or reiteration of the introduction with a few changes. What do I do with different perspectives? Perspectives in academic writing, and it's, you look at the IELTS, it is full of it. You are, if you're, let me just use the issue of poverty. If we're going to look at reducing poverty around the world, we can look at this problem from different perspectives. We can look at it from the educational point of view, because education is a solution. It can reduce poverty. Investment, so it's a financial, we look at it from a financial point of view. Investment in infrastructure and investment in building homes, etc. We can look at it from a social point of view. If you make neighborhoods safer or better by improving lighting or improving roads, you're giving jobs, etc. So it's social, environmental, financial, etc. So the thing is, when we are looking at problems, it's very easy to think, oh yes, I know nothing about this. But when you start introducing the idea of perspective, we look at from the environmental, financial. The same applies in every question. It takes away the fear of being able to answer any questions whatsoever. Any other questions? Like maybe take one or two more, and then we would probably have to stop. Assessment, so big. What about personal examples? I'll look at that. When it comes to writing personal examples in task 2, I try to get my students to avoid this. When it says examples from your experience, from an abstract point of view, this is in, if I am from in the UK, in Iraq, in Russia, in South America, in China, in Japan, those are experiences that I may be aware of from news. I get students writing a lot, I do this, I do that, or my father does this. I think I would avoid that. That would be a big no-no in an academic essay. And in speaking part 3, it would be unacceptable. So I think we need to think about this from in the task 2 writing, and definitely not in task 1. So I would say avoid it and try and get students to turn it around and say, you can say in my hometown, in my country, or name the country. Okay. How many words? The words above 250 are not penalized. However, I say to my students to write between 250 and 285. If students write more than that, quite often the arguments start falling apart and becomes very repetitive. Stick to 250 to 285, 5 paragraphs, and the body 3 paragraphs of 65, 70 words each. You think about it, that's very easy to control and for you to develop. I would say that bigger equal paragraphs, you need to think about making the paragraphs roughly the same. There should be a balance. I mean, obviously you're not going to write 70, 70, 70, and my division of words in a paragraph is just what I get my students to aim for, to control. It is not fixed. I cannot say what it is. But I have had students write 450 words, and I had one recently who did this, and I sent it back because I marked my essays electronically and said, rewrite it and give me 285 words. Think of quality, not quantity. Counter-arguments. This is going, I'll answer that. Counter-arguments. If you've got an essay, to what extent you agree or disagree, you're presented with an opinion or a stance or a situation or a solution. It is only polite and common sense, that first of all you present somebody else's opinion before you add your own. And it is this concept which helps us when we're writing, getting our students to write. Although I agree with this, I disagree, or I would like to add. It helps the students one paragraph about the other or other person's opinion, and then 2 paragraphs about our own when we have discussed both views and give your own opinion. If you think about this basic structure, discuss both these views and give your own opinion. That is the basic structure. You consider some people, other people, and then me. When it comes to what extent you agree, I would put introduction, other people's opinion in 1 paragraph, and then 2 paragraphs about my opinion, and try and get a balance that way. Aim for about 7 to 9 words of vocabulary for a lesson. That's as much as students can cope with. My advice to you for academic vocabulary is to look at the AWL, the academic word list, or the academic keyword list. If you Google those, you'll get them on the web. The grammar points, I think you need, as far as possible, to do that. I think I am going to have to stop there. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and I hope this has been of some use to you. Okay, thank you. And goodbye from London for me. Okay, bye-bye.